Hi, if any new participants have joined us, welcome to today's webinar. We're just giving it a few more minutes to see if we have more people joining across various time zones, and then we will begin. Okay, so good evening, everyone, or I would say good morning or afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from today, and welcome. I'm Shraddha Mehta, Senior Associate at the Red Pen, and I'm delighted to be hosting today's session. For those of you who are meeting us for the first time, let me share a little bit about who we are and what it is that we do. The Red Pen is a global education consultancy that works with students and families from across the world, and our consultant team is equally international too. We have a presence across multiple countries, and because of this, we have expertise across various education systems and global university destinations. From India to the US and UK, Canada, Europe, Asia, and beyond, we have worked with students from all over. And I'm hoping that a lot of you joining us today are also equally international, so you're going to find this session very helpful. Our consulting team also brings a strong domain and subject-specific expertise. So whether a student is applying for popular majors like STEM or business, economics, the humanities or arts, or even very unique majors like speech pathology, we've done it all. We're also proud to have the US News as a strategic partner, and this gives us access to data-driven insights and admissions trends, which allow us to guide families with strategy and with evidence and not with guesswork. Lastly, we also have access to a panel of admissions officers from top global universities, like the one that you've all joined us here to be hearing from in just a short while today. So our goal for today's session is quite simple. It is to share admissions intelligence on how to elevate your undergraduate application and understand what truly makes a student competitive. If these are some of the top universities that you're looking for, the information that you get today is something you really should be taking notes for. And if you want further guidance, please do reach out to us at the Red Pen so we can help you achieve the dreams that you see on this page right now. So helping us do this, I'm very, very delighted and excited to introduce Dr. Kim Dixit, who is our founder and CEO of the Red Pen, and Ms. Amber Bisnauth, a former admissions officer at Stanford University. Together, they bring both the strategic perspective and insider information on what makes an application stand out. Before we begin, if you guys have any questions, please use the Q&A box that you have access to in your Zooms, and we will answer at the end of the session. With that, I'll hand it over, please, to Kim. You can take over. Kim, you're on mute.
Wow, the first technical glitch of the day, my fault. Sorry, I wanted to say thank you, Shraddha, and thank you everyone for joining us. And we have an amazing turnout already so far. So I'm really excited that all of you have joined us to hear me and especially hear Amber, our special guest today, talk about her experience and her insights from her time in the admissions office at Stanford and Harvard. Um, uh, Okay, I'm going to move on and just quickly talk a little bit about what we do at the Red Pen. I think Shraddha already mentioned, that we can help you achieve the dreams she discussed. But I started the Red Pen with some other co-founders about 15 years ago. I don't know which slide we are on. This slide?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So I'm not talking about our services. Sorry.
Oh,
Sorry.
sorry.
Let me
It
start
was
with this. Okay, I'm
when
sorry.
I was trying
Let's
to
start with
unmute
this.
you, it glitched forward. So we will get to that again.
All right, come back to that in a minute. But first, let me tell you what it is that we need to prepare you for. So, the US application is a very complex, somewhat, I think, opaque system of requirements and things that need to be executed for the application process. And I think a lot of families and students find it a little bit daunting to imagine that all of this needs to be covered in the college application process. As many of you might have experienced in other countries, the process is not so holistic, and there aren't so many parts and moving parts and pieces that need to come together. So that's why the US process is something that we specifically spend a little bit extra time discussing, explaining, and also helping you prepare for. So I want to just go through this very quickly to say that, what we do, what you need to think about when you think about the US application, and the reason that it does feel like there's a lot to prepare for, is because there are these different aspects, and they kind of come together, overlapping in some senses, but also standing on their own. And I'll start with data because that's the one that really stands on its own. And what I mean by data is really your grades, the strength of your curriculum, how well you've done on standardized tests, and your overall academic record from grade 9 to 12 is what U.S. admissions officers want to see. And this contrasts, as many of you would know, with a lot of other parts of the world where they only want to see your 12th grade scores or your board scores or things like that. They want to see all of your, semester, end of semester marks on a transcript for all 4 years of high school. So this is very, very important because it really helps the admissions office get a sense of how you would perform in their institution, and how you would handle the rigor of the curriculum that they've set up, and the sort of academic expectations of their student body. So I think I want to just emphasize that this is a very important piece. This is not a piece that can be overlooked. It is not a piece that can be made up for in some other way. This is sort of the core the core aspect of the application process. So when you think about what it is that you need to prepare, that is kind of this is basically a non-negotiable piece of the application process. So moving on to the processes that are slightly more I won't say optional, but they're a little more subjective, and everybody's way of approaching this would be, individual. I think I want to go back to data for a second and say there's a point here. This is strength of curriculum. And I just want to highlight that it is not the case that any particular curriculum is preferred or favored in the US admissions process over any other. So I think a lot of people worry that, maybe they're in sort of a national curriculum that isn't they feel maybe not as well understood by US admissions officers. But when it comes to the data, you need to be doing well in your curriculum and your context. So coming back now to the voice piece, which is this yellow box where we want to talk about how you express yourself, really, and how you kind of connect the dots between different parts of your application. And this is where you need to ask your teachers who've known you for anywhere from depending on the kind of school you're in, anywhere from 3 to 1 year of high school, and they know your academic performance in their courses. The essays are a component of the application that the student needs to use to really express who they are and the kind of person they'll be on campus. And that comes that covers things from, like, when I say who they are, what are their interests? How did they develop those interests? Why are they pursuing those interests? And also, what is their character? What kind of a person are they? So this is the way that, admissions officers really want to, this is the mode that they use to find out who a person really is. So it's important that you give those a lot of attention, and and also, pay attention to the authenticity of the essays when it comes to who you are. The application form is another part of your voice. So the application form, it sounds like a form. You fill it in and you give your basic information, and that is part of it. But there's also a big part of the application form that has to do with activities you've been involved in, other explanations you need to make, anything. And again, that'll be individualized by student, and that will also express a lot about who you are and what you've done. Demonstrated interest is something that, it varies from college to college how much this matters, but in some colleges, it's a big piece of an admissions team knowing who you are when they open your application. If you visited their campus, if you've met them at your own high school, or if you have, reached out to them in some other way. So that can also be one form of, expressing yourself and who you are and having them get to know you. The next piece is talent. And I think this is where a lot of people focus because they know that for US admissions, the data is not enough on its own. You can be, have perfect scores and everything and still not get into the top colleges. The top colleges love to say that we don't admit more perfect score students than we do admit. So that's something that they love to say that, I think getting perfect marks does not mean you're an automatic fit in for any of these top colleges because the talent piece is really what demonstrates, like I said, who you are, where you want to spend your time. If you're a very, very, intellectually strong student, academically strong student, where are you applying those skills, right? Where are you really kind of taking the time to apply and extend your academic skills or elevate. So this is where things like, academic programs like Olympiads and competitive exams and all of those things come in, but as well as things like sports and music and student leadership and all of those things come under extracurricular and unique talent. So this is something that, students do need to spend some time on. Like I said, if you start, it's from ninth to 12th grade. So if you start doing all your extracurricular activities at the end of grade 11, it's a little bit too late to really demonstrate any depth in any of them. So this is something where students really need to kind of start a bit earlier and start shaping what this piece of the application process looks like. And then, like I said, the voice piece is what will connect the dots between the talent and the data and really help a student express why they've done what they've done and how they've developed the talents that they've developed. One thing I want to just point out here is the red box, which says other. So what we like to say is all the other boxes are in your control. You can do something to shape what comes out of those parts of the process. The other things are the things you cannot shape. These are the things that are not in your control. So if you need financial aid, then you need it. That's not something that you can control unless you're, win the lottery or something, but unlikely for most people. So if you need financial aid and a university does not have it, cannot offer you financial aid, there's a chance that you may not be admitted based on that alone. Right. So, especially in the case where there's a need-aware institution and they only, they may not admit students that they can't fund. So there's a lot of complexity around financial aid in the US. It is definitely true that US institutions are the most generous in the world for international students. So you do always hear about international students getting full scholarships and things like that. But there's a lot of complexity around that, and that's all I'm going to say about it today because there's a whole other presentation we can do on it. But that's something that is out of your control. How the university is looking at financial aid financial needs. So the next point is legacy status. Some universities do favor legacy students. That's becoming less and less these days because there's a lot of scrutiny around it. And what I mean by legacy students is a parent attended the university. And so, you may or may not, sorry, if your parent attended the university, there may be some sort of, I don't know, thumb on the scale for you when it comes to the admissions office. If that is not the case for you, do not have a parent who attended the university, you will not get that, and that is not in your control. So I need to say that. That's all I meant to say. Institutional priorities are something like, the university's decided it's going to enroll 20% fewer students from your region, and it's going to distribute those, that percentage across the world in other places. So the students in those other places may get in at a higher rate than the students where in the geography where you are. So that's just, the priority of the university. We don't always know it and we can't control it. And then finally, demographics, which is very similar. Sorry, I sort of switched those around. So demographics is what I was saying is they want, fewer students from India and China and more from Brazil and African countries or something like that. But institutional priorities might be something like, they need to get more majors, more students who are going to speak French, or who are going to play certain instruments or certain things like that that the university just needs, or they are refurbishing a dorm and they have 200 fewer seats to give. I mean, there's all kinds of things that the institutions are doing on their end. We don't know about it and we can't control it. So I think I'm done with this. I think I covered everything, and I just want to get into a little bit about how what the red pen does in relation to those things. So as I said, the exploration piece is what we start around eighth grade. We really try to get students to be aware that, developing interest and honing talents from an early age will help them in the long run. It's not about putting pressure on a student to, be at their peak performance in grade 8. It's about starting to explore, deciding later when you have to do fewer things because the academics get very intense, where are you going to spend your energy, and just figuring this out. And that's where, once the exploration piece happens, we move on to personalization, kind of really identifying the activities that are important to a particular student and starting to think about how to build the storyline. So if a student is very, very interested in, let's say, um, social service, which is, their choice and their passion, and they've done it, then we might want to build and they're also, strong in math and interested in economics and policy, then we might start building a narrative around developmental economics or something like that, and introducing activities that help to, lay the foundation for that storyline. Elevation, like I said, is something where we take that interest or those storylines and we help you identify ways to elevate, as in, what kinds of competitions can you do? What kind of competitive summer programs can you enroll in? What kind of independent projects can you do? And how can you become a leader in this space? So these are the things that we focus on around grade 10. When it comes to grade 11, and mind you, all this time academics is going on. You need to be doing well in school. And so we're there to kind of help you manage the time manage, pick the things that are going to, maximize and optimize your the time you have to put in. When it comes to grade 11, we're really talking about, again, curation. We've already got that storyline going. What are the few things you need to do to kind of just, add the spike or, put the edge on whatever it is you've been doing till then. And then execution is telling these stories, putting the application together, choosing the right colleges, identifying the strategies around different aspects of college choice, and all the things that I mentioned in the voice bucket. I mean, the voice really starts here mostly, because all the other things, the data is going on all the time. The talent is being sort of nurtured along the way, and it's the execution piece where we really get into the voice of it and telling your story. So this is what we help you do with the red pen, and that's how we sort of position you well for the application process. I'm going to hand it over now to Amber, who's going to talk about the nuts and bolts of how to do this. So I'll leave it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Kim, and thank you, Shraddha, for the introduction. So Kim just gave you a great overview, and I'm excited to be able to dive more into that, get straight into it. What you're here to hear about today, starting with how students can build their extracurricular profile. So I do want you guys to keep in mind that selective universities are not so focused on counting your activities. So they're not looking like, oh, this student had 15, well, this had 10. That's not going to be a primary consideration as much as they're looking at what a student actually committed to. And so I say we, speaking in the past tense as the former admissions officers, but admissions officers want to see students who follow their genuine interests, but students can't follow something they haven't found. So it's really important that students find what their genuine interests are, and they lean into activities that spark their curiosity or get them excited. And that's what's going to be more compelling and intriguing to admissions officers as they're reading thousands of applications. That real enthusiasm is what's going to ultimately lead students to writing and being able to articulate more compelling, stronger essays and demonstrate sustained engagement when it comes to activities. And so you see that point there in the middle that says depth over breadth. Again, admissions officers aren't going to reward students having just long lists. They actually get excited when they see commitment and impact. So a few, and I won't even say a few, but fewer activities pursued deeply over several years with some sort of measurable progress is going to be more highly valued and carry more weight than 10 clubs that are surface level. And so you see also under there, it says grow roles over time. Colleges love to see that students evolve, that they mature, that they grow. And so let's say your first year in secondary school, you're a participant in a certain activity. Let's take debate, for example. Then the following year, you can become a contributor, a secretary, or even vice president if you're able to move at that pace. And then in your final years, you're moving up in leadership. Maybe you're starting another club that's adjacent to or just dives deeper into the interests that you're solidifying as you grow through the years. That kind of progression is going to show admissions officers how you're maturing, how students are maturing, and that they're taking on more responsibility and initiative, which again are key characteristics. They're standout and positive characteristics that schools want to see in students. And AOs aren't just looking for a title. So it's not just the fact that a student's a president or a founder, though those are positive things and they can start a good narrative, but they are looking more for that context to be built out. So how did a student start something? How did they improve it? How did you leave your mark? And this could look like launching an independent project or organizing a community event. Maybe you created a tutoring program because you found a need and you met it. That's the big thing. If you can find a need and meet it, that's going to paint a better picture for admissions officers. Again, you're showing that commitment and initiative. And so also important when it comes to activities, don't want you to exclude things like work or family and community responsibilities. Those do also help paint a picture for how you're spending your time outside of the classroom and how you're growing. So again, part-time jobs, maybe you're helping care for some siblings, maybe you're translating for family members, and that can be pretty demanding. Or maybe you're even helping support a family business. These are all experiences that are going to help demonstrate that responsibility and resilience on your part as a student. And they help AOs, again, get a better understanding of what you're doing and how you're growing. But the key really in determining how compelling your activities are is how this word you'll hear all throughout today, and you already have already, how authentically you're following your interests. So I encourage students all the time, take the time, especially in your younger years, to explore and figure out what it is that lights you up, that makes you excited or gets you curious. The goal is really for students to be able to build a profile that reflects who they are, who they're becoming, what they value, and how they contribute to the world around them. So, everything I just shared sounds good. I hope it sounds good and interesting, but how can you practically apply what I just said? Starting simply, and I will be focusing on students as I talk. But one, notice what sparks your curiosity. I've mentioned this already. Your interests are often going to reveal something about you through moments that capture your attention. Maybe you took a class that you constantly talk about after school, or a project that you were a little more invested in than your peers. You didn't have to go the extra mile, but you did. Or maybe a subject that you research on your own. Those are all key indicators of what might excite your curiosity. Then you'll want to, that second bubble at the top, explore broadly, but then narrow it in. Early on in your secondary schooling, it should feel kind of like a sampling phase if you don't know already what you're interested in. You can explore by taking extra classes, joining different clubs, just expose yourself to new topics without pressure. And then as your interests become more clear and solidified, focus in on those interests inside and outside of the classroom. And then you'll kind of want to be an investigator of yourself. Track your patterns over time. As you explore, reflect on what is consistently motivating you. Are you drawn to problem solving or being creative or just helping others? Maybe you really light up when you're able to build systems that help others. These patterns are often going to point you towards potential future academic paths or even career themes that are good for you. And then finally, as an investigator, you'll want to test your interests through real experiences. So, shadowing, summer programs, personal projects, volunteering, competitions, as Kim mentioned with Olympiads, those are great if you can get to that. Or internships, they can just help transform something that might be vague curiosity into some more real insight on what intrigues you. And that can either really excite you or just become a passing phase that helps you in the process of elimination to getting to what you really care about. And then remember, at the end of the day, the goal is not for you to have to choose a major by the time you're 14 years old. The goal here, especially as you're starting younger, is to identify genuine interests that can guide the classes you choose if you have that flexibility in your curriculum, activities you join, and ultimately the content and the substance of your future essays. So this slide can be kind of ominous, the X factors. We've talked about what it looks like for students to explore and build a meaningful profile, but what helps them stand out when it comes to the actual application? So that top point, you see their hunger for learning. Admissions officers are looking for students that are curious beyond just what they're required to do. This is something that signals that a student will actively engage in learning and take advantage of the resources on their campus. They won't just complete the bare minimum. Then there's the depth of engagement. Sustained involvement over time that shows commitment. And you've heard me say those words: commitment, initiative, authenticity. These are buzzwords that will probably keep coming up because they matter. That reassures AOs that the student doesn't just choose random opportunities, but what they choose, they invest in meaningfully and they care about it. Then there's owning the process. Students that take initiative reflect maturity, independence, and these selective universities want students who can handle the freedom that's going to come in college and that responsibility without having to constantly be directed and handheld. And then there's involvement in your community and school, which I mentioned just a bit earlier. Contribution is going to matter more than participation. And what I mean by that is, again, serving in an activity, a club, or a project versus simply receiving from one. So you can start off as a participant, but again, evolving throughout. Maybe you're contributing as a secretary or as a leader in some formal or informal role. Either way, you're going to want to take some steps, and Kim mentioned this also, to start benefiting the organizations you're a part of. And students who give back in that way signal that they strengthen campus culture, which again, schools want to see. They're not just benefiting from it. It's a two-way street. And then humility. So this one can be a bit of a tricky one because we don't want students to sell themselves short or to undersell themselves in their applications. However, when demonstrated tactfully and with the proper guidance, humility can show that a student has self-awareness and is open to grow. Admissions officers do value students who they can see can learn from others, they can accept feedback well, and they can evolve over time. Now, here on this next slide, you'll see a few key elements as you plan an effective and purpose-driven admissions journey. So starting with rigor and strong performances. Colleges in the US assess whether or not a student has challenged themselves relative to what the school might offer. So they're looking for rigorous coursework and great grades because both do matter. And when it comes to thoughtful course selection, so again, this is if you have the flexibility and choosing your curriculum throughout school, planning ahead will ensure that students take the necessary prerequisites in order to take more challenging coursework. Again, if this is how your academic institution is set up. So if applicable, being able to plan early can help prevent any scheduling conflicts or crises that might arise from waiting until the last minute. And then there's upward academic trajectory. So if you already have great grades and you've had great grades, that's amazing. Keep up the good work. But if you might have encountered some challenges earlier in your secondary schooling, improving that over time can signal to schools maturity and resilience. And so you'll definitely want to, again, if you've encountered some hindrances up front, learn, take initiative, get some tutors, get some resources so that admissions officers can see that upward trajectory as you progress throughout your academic journey. So whether you maintain a stellar academic record or you've had to overcome some hurdles, it's just important for AOs to see that you've challenged yourself and you've learned to succeed. And then that last point there, alignment with interest. If, again, you have the flexibility to choose, even your course choices can signal to admissions officers what it is that you're interested in. They can reinforce the narrative of your application. So a student who's interested in engineering might prioritize taking additional physics courses or advanced math. A pre-law student might strengthen their writing heavy course load. AOs are paying attention to this as well. And then just a couple of freebie points that I wanted to, kind of some tips. I do want to encourage you, again, if this is an option for you, avoid overloading. So you should, as students, have advocates in your corner that can both challenge you while also not giving you more than you can handle. It's important that students not only challenge themselves, but that they succeed again. And then Ultimately, academics are your foundation. So a strong academic performance does remain the most necessary fundamental component for admissions. It's not what gets you through the door. As Kim mentioned, there are so many academically qualified students who are applying to these selective institutions. But it does keep the door open for you to walk through. The rest of your application will build on this academic foundation, and that's what's ultimately going to help you walk through that door of acceptance to the best institution for you. And then we get to how to approach standardized testing. So, as we look more into the controllable academic factors, um, how should students approach standardized testing, especially as international students? And so, you see that first point there: plan early, test early. Ideally, students should complete their first SAT or ACT for the United States 2 years prior to their anticipated graduation date. And this is going to provide students with plenty of time to have retakes if they need to, as well as have additional, more focused and continued study time to zoom in on the areas that you're finding you might need more support with. Also, testing early can really allow students to focus more later on the other controllable factors that are also significant for the application. Again, your essays, maintaining your grades, and those extracurricular activities. And again, these are the parts of your application that will help you walk through the open door that academics keep the door open to. So ultimately, there are test optional and test blind schools in the United States, and there are some that are permanently this way. So take, for example, the University of California system for those who are interested in UCLA or UC Berkeley. The thing is here, though, that's not the majority. And what test blind and test optional means, test blind means that even if you submit the test, they're not going to consider it. Test optional means that you can or cannot submit it, but it's up to you. And in theory, that shouldn't count against you. But as I said, this is not the majority and increasingly so as the years go on. So especially as international students, I always recommend it's better to have the test and not need it. And perhaps maybe if you're still not testing well, you can pivot on strategy than the other way around. You don't want to find yourself wanting to apply to an institution that requires a test and you don't have it, or you haven't put sufficient time into studying for that test. And personally, as I said, I see many selective universities that are returning to either requiring the SAT or ACT, or they're remaining unclear about what their future will hold in terms of the requirements there. So my thing is I want you to be equipped and prepared with a test score that you can be proud of by studying and testing early. And then that last point there, you see it says use practice data wisely. Students should take full-length diagnostic SAT or ACT tests if possible, and you should be able to find resources to do that. And that can help you decide which of the tests suits your strengths. And we don't have a preference similar to, as Kim mentioned, we don't have a preference to your curriculum. We have admissions officers trained to be able to understand your curriculum. We also don't have a preference when it comes to SAT or ACT. So this gives you an avenue to better understand what's best for your strengths. And then retesting does have its limits. Most students aren't going to see significant improvement past the third or fourth attempt. So this is just further reiteration: study smart, make each official test count. Now, digging deeper into the part of the application that's probably the least rigid, let's talk a bit about how to craft some purposeful essays. First, you're going to want to identify core themes. So a personal narrative isn't just a slogan, it's the thread that's going to tie together a student's choices, interests, values, your goals. You'll find that these core themes often emerge from things like what your consistent academic interests are, or maybe they can come from a long-term activity or project, or a family story, maybe something that personally motivates you. It could also come from a problem that you as a student want to solve. Ultimately, these themes should feel natural and not forced. Students also, on that second point, want to show growth and impact. And as I've said many times before, AOs, again, are looking for this growth. So what changed in and about you? What did you learn? How have you matured? That's really going to give your narrative credibility, and it can make the difference between just an interesting student and an actually compelling student. And then you're going to want to connect to your academics and your activities. So narratives feel the strongest when there's some sort of visible connection between what the student is studying, what they do outside the classroom, and what they hope to pursue in college or beyond. And so the activities and the essays should make sense together without being redundant. Ultimately, students want to use essays that reveal something about their identity. And so in the US system, and if you're applying through the Common App, which most institutions accept, the personal statement is the main essays that most US colleges will receive. And that gives a student room to share more about who they are, again, their identity. Those school specific essays are going to ask you more about why and how a student fits with that particular school. And so combined, these essay segments should reinforce the same underlying themes, again, without being redundant or without repeating content. So also, I do encourage students to start planning their essays early because great essays do take time. And students should begin brainstorming up to, I recommend 3 to 6 months prior to their first application deadlines, because that can help remove unnecessary pressure, unnecessary stress, and instead allow you to think and write creatively and unhindered as a student. And when it comes to brainstorming these essays, I encourage you to brainstorm deeply. Before you start the actual writing exercises, explore some questions like, hey, what experiences or challenges do I think have shaped me? What do I actually value and why do I value it? Is there a specific perspective I think I can bring to campus? Because here the goal is not finding a perfect topic, it's about discovering an authentic one. And you'll find with the personal statement, you can literally write about anything. So it's more about finding an authentic topic that speaks to you. And then you'll just want to choose meaningful stories. Standout essays come from reflection, not regurgitating or recapping your resume. A powerful essay often grows from a small moment that captures something essential about the student's character or their worldview. And ultimately, a great essay is going to take multiple drafts. Feedback from, again, a trusted adult or advisor should help sharpen and clarify your message without taking away from your voice as a student. So, as a final tidbit of advice, a bit of a warning as well, I definitely encourage you to avoid overly broad topics. I know I said it's not about the topic and it's not, but you don't want to choose a topic that sounds like anybody could write it. Again, and this is going to go back to one of our favorite words, authenticity, and introspection. You taking the time to reflect on who you are, what motivates you, what interests you. And that's what's going to keep an AO engaged and keep their attention. And so now to give you something that's a bit more purposeful and tangible, I'm going to pass it back to Kim as she starts to discuss more about a specific case study.
Thank you, Amber. That was really, I think I learned a lot, and it sort of sparked a lot of the usual questions we get. And I think there's a lot of follow-up that we can also do on some of the things that you mentioned and some of the overlap with what I mentioned. So what I'm going to do now is just go through fairly quickly because I want to leave time for questions. And we have 2 case studies. I'll be presenting the Stanford applicant who we worked with, who was admitted to Stanford and several other highly prestigious institutions. I'm just talking about her Stanford application today because that's sort of the theme of the day. And then Shraddha will talk about another one from Harvard. But let's just go through talking about our student who wanted to major in economics. I will say, just before getting into her, that at Stanford, as is the case with most highly selective institutions, some are a little bit different, but you're not admitted to a major. You do not apply to economics and get admitted for economics. You indicate an area of academic interest, and you can go to the university and pursue that, or you can go and pursue something else. So it's completely not, I don't think your application isn't read in the context of this person is going to become an economist and we're admitting them to study economics. But this was her academic area of interest, and she had a lot of activities and initiatives and just academic foundation that prepared her for that really well. So she was a student actually who was studying her national curriculum, and her national curriculum happened to be in Austria. It's a very different curriculum from even a lot of other international ones, like, international curricula like the IB, or even Indian curricula like CBSE or A levels. The Austrian curriculum is quite a lot of subjects. And as Amber said, the admissions team in different regions is trained to understand the curriculum in that region. So I would not worry if you're in a place where you know, where the curriculum is not as widespread around the world as others. So don't worry about that. She did well. She had as we say here, she completed 14 of these courses. So that's a lot of courses compared to how much students study in other parts of the world. And her SAT was 1540. So she had a very, very strong, solid academic foundation to build from. Yeah, she'd also done um, a bunch of she'd done a research thesis. She'd won awards for things. She'd put the work that she did academically into competitions. She also had a lot of leadership positions. I think, like Amber said, you could really see with the student her starting out at a certain point and growing with organizations and institutions that she was a part of from a very young age, actually. And her leadership really showed through, and she really managed to kind of make really meaningful contributions. So not just, again, participation, but contribution in her activities. And she was, again, she participated in a lot of academic elevation, which included Olympiads and other competitive academic um, yeah, uh, competitions. All right. So the other thing that the student did really well is this slide is, sorry, there we go. That was the right one. The previous one. Yeah. Okay. Then I want to talk about, no, not this one. I want to talk about what happened with her, what she did in her essays. So I've told you she has a strong academic foundation. She also has a really diverse and a diverse extracurricular profile that shows a lot of commitment and depth. And the essays are really what helped show her character around those things, right? So you've got those pieces that we know Stanford loves, which is your depth of commitment, your um, uh, depth of commitment. Sorry, anyway, I will come to that in the next slide. But she managed to demonstrate all of that through the essays, her character. And one of the things she did is, like I said, she everything. Basically, this line up here where it says her essays show that she sees the world as connected systems, not isolated facts. And when you look through her application, you just keep seeing connection. Connection is like her theme. It's the thing that is kind of, she's seeking it, she's making it, she's building it. Connections are very, very important to everything that she does. So she shows that in the way that she moves between her personal experiences into, saying, my personal background and identity is something that, I feel other people need to understand or know about, or it's under some kind of threat, or it's marginalized. And she really took that to another level with her, the activities she got involved in. So she was very committed to helping other people understand who she was on a macro level. And then she also, the proof of leadership thing, and this is interesting because the roommate note show, the roommate essay is a sort of, I don't know what you call it. It's a piece of the Stanford application that's been there for so long. And it's kind of the thing where they want to see, they're trying to get you to really just be who you are and not say, and by the way, I did X and Y and Z and achieved A, B, C, D. That's not part of the roommate essay. Is just like, you're talking to a friend, who are you? So even in that essay, she manages to be very authentic, be who she is, but also still show that, she's a leader, a connector, a carer, and she really puts that across in a fairly standard way, actually, because a lot of the roommate essays that I've seen over the years are people are trying to be really creative and quirky and out of the box, and that also works. But like Amber said, there's a lot of flexibility here, and this student really just did a good job by just saying who she is, and it demonstrated a lot about, like I said, it sort of put the spotlight on other parts of our application where it made you say, I believe all of this too builds in here. Then interdisciplinary thinking, like again, connecting, talking about a project she did on plant-based meat that wasn't just about science. It was also about economics. It was also about markets. It was also about lots of other things that didn't just have to do with, one scientific principle of putting, of creating that that thing through the lab. So there were a lot of connections made there as well. Okay, moving on to this next slide has a lot on it, but it's nice to just kind of see this character, strength of character, depth of commitment, and intellectual vitality. That's what we saw from this student, and that's what Stanford really cares about. So this, I'm not going to go through all of this, but it just kind of helps us see how she, she took her sort of academic interest and sort of translated them in many ways over to community connection and caring was a lot of and she was leading that. She was creating that herself. But also I want to just point this out too, because I can't think of anything she did that was like, I started this initiative. I started this. I think she did a bake sale. That was about the only thing, and that was in her school, right? But everything else was an existing initiative in her community, an existing activity during her school breaks. I mean, and she sort of got into those existing organizations and initiatives and expanded them and made them, she was contributing a lot to making them even stronger. So that was our Stanford applicant, and I'm gonna let Shraddha go ahead with the next one.
Thanks. Thank you, Kim, for that. Okay, so I know we have very little time left, and I do have a lot of questions that I can see, but I'm going to quickly talk about this Harvard applicant as well, because now that Kim gave us an example of how an application has played out in one context, I kind of want to bring this a little bit closer to home, where the majority of our audience is actually joining us from today, which is from India. So this is a student that was admitted to Harvard University for government, and what you'll see is that the same principles that Kim and Amber have talked about apply, even though the context looks very different, right? So to start off with, you will see that this was a Mumbai-based student. On paper, he was very strong, very high academics. But what made the difference in his application wasn't just the achievement, right? It was the choices that he made over time. So one of the biggest examples of this is, as you see here, is that it was his academic path. He chose against the school's advice to take 4 higher level IB subjects, right? Which is already quite unusual. And one of those choices was to take Math AA, which is a very rigorous course, even though he wasn't even applying for a STEM major. Now, a lot of questions will come, what is STEM? So STEM is science, technology, engineering, and math. So technically, he didn't need to showcase any rigor in math to be able to study government, but he chose to do this, right? And early on, he struggled. He scored a 5 on his assessments, and he was advised to drop it, but he didn't want to take the easier route. So this kind of goes into, he wanted that enthusiasm point that Amber made about. He just wanted to learn, or the X factor, that hunger for learning that we talked about. That is what the student demonstrated. And he did prioritize long-term learning over like short-term higher grades. And over time, his academic performance did improve, right? So what we saw in the earlier slides was the upward academic trajectory that students want, that admissions officers want to see. And finally, his predicted scores and final IB scores did match that. So yes, he took a challenging course, but he also did well in it. So I just want to emphasize that doing well still matters in spite of the hunger for learning, right? And so this again shows that they value students who lean into a challenge. They're not looking for students who take the safest path to the highest grade. A lot of students come to us at the Red Pen and they're like, oh, can I just do my extended essay in global perspectives because I can score higher on this? Is that the correct path for them to choose? Likely not, right? Because what they're looking for is intellectual curiosity. They're looking for resilience. They're looking for a willingness to stretch themselves and apply themselves. And so the same pattern for the student also showed up outside of the classroom, right? Model United Nations, MUN, was one of their biggest activities. And again, I'll go back to Amber's point where the student didn't just participate, but contributed, right? So for years, instead of just attending conferences, I think he transformed how his school prepared for them. He built a peer mentorship system, a collaborative training system in school where the students coached and challenged each other. Participation deepened, the club grew. And I think by grade 12, if I'm not mistaken, Harvard Model United Nations had invited him to help him organize that conference, right? So during COVID also, he noticed that many of the local street vendors he grew up buying from, they disappeared. And when they came back, they were struggling with adapting to digital payments, visibility, and he took that personally. He helped them digitize it. He helped showcase them on Google Maps, right? So that is that community aspect that, Kim spoke about as well in the Stanford applicant, different context, but still same principles apply, right? So now when admissions officers read this application, they weren't just seeing a list of impressive activities. They saw a student who challenged themselves academically, took initiative in his community, demonstrated leadership that grew over time as well. So I guess if we had to summarize what Amber and Kim have said and the two case studies we've talked about, it's, the academic rigor and challenge is extremely important. That is the first hurdle. That is what gets your foot through the door. And then what makes you stand out once you're in that room is what you're doing in your profile building outside of that, right? So the students weren't trying to do everything. They were trying to do a few things, but they were trying to do them well. And they created impact instead of just waiting for opportunities. They were very proactive about it. And then that all came together in a very compelling narrative, right? So I think the key message for families listening today is that profiles like these don't really come together in grade 12, right? What Kim and Amber have been saying throughout, we need to start early. We need to start with strategy, with direction, and consistent guidance that kind of happens over time and not just overnight, right? And that is actually why we at the Red Pen have created Admits 360. So this is our most bespoke and leadership-led admissions program that we have. It is a high-touch engagement for families who want clarity, who want accountability, who want expert eyes like that of Kim and Amber on the application at every milestone that the student is doing in their profile building journey. And through Admits 360, we take in our students under a mentorship program where they're working with our senior most advisors. It includes one-on-one guidance and direct strategic oversight from Dr. Kim herself, as well as other former admissions officers like Amber. And that level of expertise in a student's journey matters when it happens over a progressive period of time, right? So what that means in practice is that we're not just advising on general application strategy. And we certainly don't take the cookie cutter approach, because if there's anything you've taken today is that doesn't work, right? Our focus is always on real value add activities, and whether that's academics, testing strategy, research internships, or passion projects, every piece needs to be intentional. It needs to eventually be connected, and building that cohesive narrative that feels, as Amber said, authentic to the student and has to land with impact with any admissions team that's reading the application, right? So if you're listening today and you've been thinking that, well, we don't just need information, we need a partner in this process, then maybe Admits 360 is exactly what you're looking for, right? So at the end of this session, I am going to keep the slide on while we go to the Q&A. So if any of you would like to contact us, you need further guidance, any sort of mentorship, please do get in touch. We're happy to do a counseling session one-on-one. But in the meantime, for the questions that we do have now, I am going to go through them for Kim and Amber to answer. So one question that we have here is, if a student's earlier grades are fairly average, but they show strong academic improvement in grade 11th and 12th, how is that viewed in the admissions process? So before Kim and Amber answer, I think this kind of connects to the Harvard application that I gave, example that I gave. The student was not doing well in math AA and eventually improved that score over time. So I think it does make a difference, doesn't it? The upward trajectory.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think we've kind of made it clear. This question came early, so throughout we've discussed that
Answered.
the upward trajectory is important. I think it's one thing I want to say, however, is that especially in the Indian context, we do get a lot of families or a lot of kids who are like, really not doing well in their course grades, but they're doing well in their board exams, and that is very hard to make up for. But having said that, some schools are known for motivational grading and things like that. So usually the admissions office will know things like that. So it's very important to do well in your board exams for sure, and try to do well throughout as well.
So speaking of that, Kim, another student has asked the question specifically for Indian national exams, right? Like the IIT JEE exam. Do those rankings matter? Do they land any impact with the admissions?
Do you know the answer to this, Amber? Because I do, but I would like to know your perspective. You don't know the
No,
answer?
India wasn't one
Okay.
of my specialties. We were in the boardroom, but no, I'd love to defer to
So
your listening.
yeah, no, we have seen students who showcase this in their application if they have the score. It isn't, and it's something that, if the score is good, and usually I think this isn't the case where a student has taken a gap year and applied, so they have their JE rank or something like that. In the US process, that's really the only way you can showcase this because there's no such thing as like a predicted JEE rank. But at the same time, in UK admissions, they do actually sometimes put your rank in the conditions of your admissions offer. So there's a little bit of, I wouldn't say it doesn't matter at all, but it's hard to showcase it before the exam is actually finished.
I think, Kim, if I remember from one of our earlier on Harvard Admits as well, he had put the JEE ranking on. And I think at that time, the strategy we applied was also making sure that the American admissions teams knew that the US was still a priority for that student, right? Because the moment that they
Right.
thought that they were applying for engineering or national universities in India, it might have negatively affected their chances of admissions to the
Mhm.
US. So strategy again is extremely important, and we can guide you on exactly where to place what information to make sure
Yeah,
that it's
that's a
not
good point.
viewed incorrectly, right?
Very good point.
Another interesting question I see here is what are some of the red flags in a candidate's application? And that kind of ties into someone else's question that says that if they have failed at something, is it better to exclude it or to mention it as a personal growth story, for example?
Yeah, I'd be curious to know. I'll work backwards on the question. I'd be curious to know what the failure, what that means. Right. So if it's a class, obviously you can't really hide that. And you'll definitely want to build context around that in the additional information section and work with an advisor to be able to strategically contextualize that. If it's a venture, like an extracurricular venture, really framing is what's going to matter in both cases. Like, what did that failure mean? What did you learn from it? Can you somehow build that into your essays, into your narrative? Because again, we are looking for maturity and growth. But I do think what you mean by failure does matter, just in terms of how we would approach that. And then the first question, yeah, red flags. Yes, there are some red flags. I wouldn't really be concerned about this too much, but some red flags we've seen here. Make sure you get the right institution name. So if you're working smarter, not harder, and using a similar essay for multiple institutions, if you're applying to Stanford and this happened, this is a specific example. Great application. I was really enjoying it. And then at the end of one of the essays was like, and that's why I think I'll make a meaningful contribution to University of Pennsylvania. And I was like, well, I hope you do, but that's not this application. That's a big red flag. Just dot your I's, cross your T's when you're editing essays. And then just using appropriate tone. And I'll leave it at that.
I
Okay.
just want to say
Thank-
something, and again, we haven't mentioned this at all, and I'm surprised there are no questions about it also. But when it comes to AI, I think
Mm.
that's a red flag if your essay really looks like it's been generated by AI. And I want to also just say something about that because earlier when Amber was speaking about the time it takes to create good essays. Um, I have to say that, of course, we all are using AI now, and even encouraging students, to get ideas, to generate ideas, start their thinking process, etc. We spend a lot of time brainstorming with students, and that can or cannot be part of that process. But even students who are using a lot and using it well, it still takes many iterations to make that essay that student's essay. That's all I'll say. But it's because it's not realistic to say don't use it or we're not using it. But I think I've seen students, who they want to use it to generate ideas and they get very far, but it still takes a lot of time, to get from there to the final draft. It's not like you can just do that in, one day or even 10 minutes or anything. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's a red flag.
So that actually, Kim, it's
So
interesting
many
you mentioned.
questions.
Yeah, there are many questions and very little time. So a lot of the ones that are personal, like if I want to do economics and dance, I see there's something about psychology. How can I build a profile? For those questions, please get in touch with us. We're more than happy
Yeah,
to speak to
I
you
would
on a
love to answer
one-on-one.
about economics and dance and everything.
Okay,
We don't,
go for it.
no,
But
I'm just saying
before,
we don't always have
okay.
time.
But Kim, there's one question that is related to AI specifically for Amber. How is AI changing the selection process? Because AI can review a lot more data in a lot less time. So what's going on over there?
Great question. And so there's articles coming out too, and colleagues are speaking to synthesize this and not give a super long answer, different institutions are taking different approaches. So Caltech, for example, they are implementing AI in some video review, which is an interesting kind of component there. Not all institutions even offer a kind of a video interview format, but they are doing that in terms of it kind of dances on an interesting line because on one hand you can't really use AI live or should not when you're being video interviewed, but they are wanting to implement it for kind of helping to break down, okay, how did these video interviews go? And then will be a part of their process. They're still going to have a human involved in the process, but similarly, other institutions, it's either University of Virginia or Virginia Tech that's being very intentional about like, hey, we're going to do a first pass with AI, but we're still going to have humans come through down the line. So just to say, and they have divulged that several institutions are like communicating with each other, like, hey, we want to use, but we don't know how we should yet. We want to see how the people respond to you in implementing that, you guys can take the first wave of shock or responses. But I say all that to say ultimately every institution is still emphasizing that there are going to be real humans reviewing the application. That AI might help kind of with certain like, okay, let's say a student's test score is like way below what they typically admit. Okay, that might help them kind of filter down. But when it comes to like, hey, your academics are set and you're in the door, like, okay, we still need human eyes to review this or to give a second review after AI might do a first pass. So similar to what Kim said, AI is being implemented to kind of help make the day-to-day more efficient, but still humans are evaluating these applications and you want that compelling story, that authentic story that's going to speak to another human admissions officer is the best way that I can synthesize that. Obviously, things are still growing and moving and changing, but that's what's prevalent and been released so far.
Okay. Thank you, Kim, and thank you, Amber. I think that's our time for today. Again, I will repeat for all the personal questions that have come our way, please do get in touch with us. Follow us on Instagram. This recording is going to be available on YouTube if you want to synthesize the information you heard about today. Or you can email us or contact us on the phone number that's provided over here, and we'll be more than happy to answer the questions one-on-one. Thank you, everyone, for joining us again today. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Amber. And we hope to see you for the next webinar that we're going to be doing in a couple of weeks. So look out
Yes,
for that.
thank you, everyone. And like Shraddha said, we will please follow up with your questions. We're really excited to answer all these questions and just get in touch with us for that. Thank you.
Thank you all. Take care.